can DNA itself, prove that a person is of Israel, of the 12 tribes of Israel, just with DNA? Can it prove that? Or can it prove that if you're from Moab or Ammon or from the Jebusites or from any of the other groups, 30, 50 different groups that we hear of in the Bible, can any of it be proven by DNA? Or can DNA prove something slightly different that I think you'll find interesting? Because I think the answer will be surprising for many of you, because a lot of viewers on my channel say they're from Ibu or Bantu or Yoruba or Fulani or different groups, or from Sudan or from Ethiopia. It doesn't really matter. But what can DNA itself? I see lots of videos where people are claiming that if you're from E1B1A, that means you're from Israel. And I will go so far as I certainly do believe that that is the lineage of Shem. And I want to show that that's about as far as that genetics can take you, that you are from the lineage of Shem versus the lineage of Ham, or versus the lineage of Japheth, or other break-offs from those different lineages. I think it's great if you can even prove that you're from the lineage of Shem. I don't come from the lineage of Shem, but many of you that listen to me do. But I also see there's so much deception in using DNA to prove things that are not at all provable with DNA, not even slightly. And I want to show that in this video, and I think you'll find it fascinating. So it can show your lineage, but it cannot show your biblical lineage at all. It can show that you come from Africa at some point in time. For many of my African American viewers that are in the US or even anywhere in the Americas that have lineages that show that they are from Africa, but did those lineages come before Columbus, or did they come after Columbus? Because DNA won't show that either. And I'll show why it's so fascinating to me, as an outsider, to see this, because it's so interesting. Because I asked, I'll start with this. I asked as I was going through this, let's say my lineage, a lot from Scotland, a lot from Ireland for me, and other places, a little bit of Spain, a little bit of other different places. But I asked it. I said, if I had a progenitor 1,000 years ago that was from Africa, direct from Africa, would that show up in my DNA test? And it said, absolutely, not even a chance. Even if it was 500 years ago, it would not show up in my lineage at all, no matter what. And I've seen videos by Curameo and others that do videos on how Europe was at one point much more, actually, there were kings that were black and that kind of thing, or African, if you want to say it that way. But the issue is, over time, the society has become one way, but it wasn't always that way. So, but to trace lineages, and a really kind viewer just today posted a great post and said, with the videos you do for all the people in Africa, which I love the people of Africa and doing this work, I love doing it. But at the same time, he said, you must be somewhere deep down inside down there. I'm going like, my heart is at least, but you can't show with DNA what you are that way. Only the Y chromosome DNA shows what your father's lineage, my direct father lineage does not come from Africa. Does that mean my mother's doesn't? No, it doesn't mean that. It means the Y chromosome does not come from Africa. But the same way I can't trace who I am beyond maybe a couple hundred years with DNA, nor can you. You just can't. You can't use it to say that you are of a certain tribe. You actually can't even say that you are Ibu or Yoruba or Bantu or any of those other groups at all, in any way at all. You can say, and we'll show that in a minute, but you can say that your family comes from this area in Ghana where other people come from that same, or in Nigeria where that group comes from. You can say that my DNA comes from this area, 20%, and 30% from this area, and 25% from this area. But that still doesn't go back thousands of years. It only traces to people that are living there right now versus you living where you are right now. So if, for instance, let's take the Fulani, for instance, and if they pushed down from Northern Africa 1,000 or 2,000 years ago, or any other group, or let's say the real Israelites were over in East Africa 3,000 years ago, and if they moved over to West Africa, that's not going to show up in the DNA at all. And even if they were taken, all the Israelites were taken away by ships or taken away, they might not even show up as a link even in West Africa. Because if there's no one there of that group left to track back to, then the DNA doesn't work that well, if that makes any sense. So it's a very, very useful tool in a sense, but it's way, way overused in what it actually means. And I want to show that so that I hope that you will do more work in your family to do actual genealogy, which actually traces your lineage. Because when I did my DNA test, I already knew, I'm going to say 95% of what I was going to get in my DNA test, because I'd already gotten my family back to the 1600s on almost every line. It's not all, but most. And so for me, it was not a big surprise at all. But if you have lost your heritage, if you're African American and gone through all the troubles that you know better than me, then yes, the lineages have been broken, at least the way of getting back there. But I do see a lot of channels that are in Americas where it's African Americans, if you want to call it that, or just Black American or Indian Americans better. They trace themselves back and they're not finding their ancestors. Most of them are not going to Africa. Most of them are actually in America at the time of the colonization, which means that at some point, some linkages to Africa came, but way before Columbus, in my opinion. I'll be doing some videos about that. But the interesting fact is that DNA, useful, but don't take it much further than it can really take. I think just be grateful that you're from Shem, right? The top son of Noah. And I think that's pretty much all that the DNA can show you. So let's get into how that works. First off, I've done videos on the fact that the 12 tribes were not pure, right? They were a mixed multitude. They were mixed before they even went in to Egypt, right? Because Judah and Simeon, we know they married Canaanite women of Ham. And we know that Joseph, while incarcerated, and then afterwards, he married an Egyptian, top Egyptian person, but still Egyptian from Ham. 3 of the lineage we know of, out of the 12, they married into the Hamitic line. So there was mixed multitude going on, at least in the matriarchal. We're going to talk about that. The mother's lineages are also traced, and I didn't even know this, to be honest, but the father's lineage is important for showing, as many of my viewers say, this, you're from Shem. It doesn't show you're from Israel, it doesn't show you're from any of the tribes that came from Shem on down, which includes Edom, right? Edom is also from E1B1A, right? It doesn't matter what tribe it is. If they came from that progenitor back there, I'll say it's Shem, I believe it is, then all the male lineage is going to come through that. No matter whether you like them or don't like them, they all come through. Moab, same thing. Even though Lot had family through his daughters, that still is going to be the Y chromosome, is still going to show Lot coming from Shem. So all of that huge group that we see, over 1 billion in Africa, they are of Shem, yes. But you cannot use DNA to show that you are a Bible people of any sort. And let's get into that. So after getting off that topic a minute, I just want to say they already were marrying into, I believe, all the other 9 brothers also married. I don't know about Benjamin, but I imagine. But the other brothers, I imagine they were living among the Canaanites. They married among the Canaanites. It only makes sense. And that Benjamin, he was younger, who knows. But I believe they're all married into the Hamite lines. But yes, the Y chromosome preserves the Shemite lineage, the E1B1A. Definitely, that comes through. So you can track that by tribe, but you can't track the 12 tribes that way. You can, Melchizedek, who was not of Abraham, he also had the same genetic, if he was of Shem. All of the Shemites, all the way from Shem through Eber, all the way down Nahor and all, they would all have that same Y chromosome all the way back. And I think if we can understand that, if you can get that, for me, I was amazed. Once I learned that, it was like, oh, that's clear. And it was interesting because it said, as I was studying this, less than 1% of a DNA test is about the Y chromosome. All it does is tells you you are from this ancient group. And that ancient group, I believe, is Shem, for those that are in sub-Saharan Africa. But taking it further than that, as I said, is taking it too far. But then they had intermarriage after that. Even Judah, some of Judah's sons married into Canaanites and married in among the Egyptians. So by the time they came out, they were a mixed multitude. We see Moses marrying into a Cushite family. Yes, I know that Jethro was Midianite, but he must have been living in Cushite areas, I believe he was. And he, of course, was probably marrying himself into Cushite lines. But Miriam said she was a Cushite, so I'll just take it that she was a Cushite. And so adoption, we see that with Ruth. We see that with Rahab. We're going to talk about them in a minute. But this adoption is real, especially right into the lineage of David, which means the lineage of Jesus. Then there's absorption. We'll see with the Jebusites, with David, which I just did in this last video about the Canaanites. And I'll put a link at the end for that. But the same thing for that. When they came in, they didn't destroy all the Jebusites. They lived among them, and which was intermarriage. We see Solomon intermarrying with people from all kinds of different nations. So we have these foreign women, as they called them. And then we see this mixed multitude, again, as I said. So was it ever this pure bloodline? No, especially for, I can say for Judah and for Simeon and for Joseph, no. They were definitely 50-50, Ham and Japheth. And if they'd done a DNA study, that's what it would have shown, half and half. It would have shown the Y chromosome for the father being from this group, and the matrilineal would have been from the mother's side. And I know that for tribes in Africa, it's all about through the male, and the Bible's all through the male. And I get that. I'm not questioning that. I'm just saying, if you're looking at what the people were, they were a mixed multitude. Whereas if I went into true Shem lands, let's say in West Africa, or in South Africa, where it was really very heavily Shem lands, then you would find that the matrilineal would be mostly of the Shem group, not a lot of mixing, and the Y chromosome would be the same one as well. And so we see that Joseph got a double portion because of his righteousness and what he did for the family, and favorite son, I guess, of his father. But so Ephraim and Manasseh, but what are they? They are 50% of Shem, and they are 50% of Mizraim. Their male lineage is definitely from Shem through the Y chromosome. But if we looked at their mother chromosome and traced the mother, that would be a whole other group, right? Not for tribals. I don't want to get into that. And I know that I don't want to upset anyone. I'm not saying that I understand how that works. I understand that if we're looking at Jesus, he came through Joseph, he came through that lineage through David, and it's through the male lines. I do get that. But when they joined, there became 13 tribes, not 12, and Levi was set apart. And so out of these, and I'm going to still refer to them as the 12 tribes, right? But they were already a mixed multitude that came out of Egypt. I quickly want to touch on Rahab because it's important. When they were conquering the land of Canaan and they came to Jericho, how did Rahab, who was she? She was a Canaanite woman living in Canaanite land, and she helped out the incoming Israelites, right? With the basket and all that story. But she was taken in and she married into the lineage of Judah, because we see that she is actually a relative or progenitor of Jesus and of David and Boaz. And then we see Boaz marrying Ruth, and we see Ruth is a Moabite. Okay. Now, Moabite, of course, was a Shem line, but it's still another mixed multitude. There was more going on in Africa than these pure bloodlines that the Gentiles, especially the European Gentiles, like to go on and on again about their bloodlines. And it wasn't about that. It was about inheritance through the male lineage. And they married females from all kinds of different groups. But I think if we get to understand that, it'll really help us to understand the genetics as we go further along. Now, like I said, I've done DNA study for myself. I knew nothing about it. I read my study and go, oh, that's interesting. Yeah. But I didn't know that they really draw from 3 different things. The first, I already mentioned, the Y-DNA from the male groups, but these are ancient. We're talking back to the Tower of Babel times or before, but these are at least Tower of Babel times. So we're talking way before Israel, way before Melchizedek, way before all this. That's that lineage, and that's all the Y-DNA can tell you, nothing else. I've mentioned that already. Then we'll talk about a minute about the mtDNA, or the mother's DNA. And this is interesting because the mother's DNA it doesn't show any tribal lineage that way, but it's just as ancient, and actually some ways more ancient. In some ways it's more useful than the male, and it's used as well. But the female DNA shows more where groups of people move to rather than just where that Y chromosome male. It shows where they were, so you can actually track groups of people a little better. Within this Y chromosome group, you can see different peoples in West Africa or in East Africa and here and there, because through these mtDNA or the matriarchal or through the mothers. And I asked the AI to ask about this because it's very interesting, and came up with an interesting conclusion. And that is, if with all this intermarriage, which they did, and it doesn't show up in the male lineage, as I said, it only shows up in the female. But if you were going to find a group of people in Africa that was most likely to be of Israel, what would you be looking for? Would you be looking for some group in West Africa who had been living there stable in that place for 3,000 years? So the matriarchal lineage of the DNA is very stable and just one group. And the male is the Y, of course, the same group. Or should we be looking for a group that has the Y chromosome but has multiple different female attributes within the genetic makeup of that people? And it said, yes, if you're going to be looking for Israel, and if Israel is a mixed multitude, as we see they were when they came out of Egypt, and with all the other mixing they went through in Babylon, just over and over and over again, and living among the Canaanites, then in the matriarchal side of things, not in the patriarchal side, but in the mtDNA of the mothers, we can see different groups. So if we see a group of people that have many different matriarchal lineages, but one lineage of Shem, then that might be a good place. And I'll let you guess in the comments down below what it came up with, which was, to me, absolutely fascinating, because it goes with the video that I just did, and it was Sudan and South Sudan. That is the place in Africa that most closely matches what the DNA should be if we use just those two profiles, what that place would be. And it was interesting. I'm going to show a couple comments by people that were from that area that put on my last video saying, hey, no, we're Israel, right? I'm going like, of course, the South Africans and Namibians feel they're Israel, and the West Africans and Yoruba, Bantu, everybody feels they're Israel. But I'm just talking about, if we just look at this one thing, nothing to do with culture, nothing to do with words, vocabulary, language, just at the DNA, and the fact that they came out a mixed multitude, as they mixed with Ham, it will not show, as I said, on the male side of things at all. Absolutely not. It shows in the female side. If there was just one female lineage along with that one male lineage, then we say that's a stable population. But when we see 3, 4, 5 different matriarchal lineages within the population, we go, that's a mixed multitude. It does not prove that Sudan and South Sudan are where Israel was at the time. But maybe it was close by there too. Maybe it was in Kenya. Maybe it was Ethiopia. I don't know. But that people, the people that are there, are the most closely related to what would be considered a mixed multitude in the mother side of the lineage. And these are ancient lineages, not from 100, we're talking thousands of years ago, that these matriarchal groups that were married into this E1B1A wasn't just one matriarch, it's numerous. So there was mixing going on, which makes sense when you look at Sudan, where it's located as well. Clearly, I want to just quickly go over this one more time. The Y DNA, the paternal seed, the seed that talks about in the Bible, it comes only from the father. It does not mix. It lasts thousands of years, and it defines macro. So macro means, as you know, the big picture, the top picture. You cannot use it, okay, at all, to pick out different tribes. You can't even pick out Bantu from Yoruba or Ibu or Fulani or any other group. You cannot pick them out by the Y chromosome. You can only pick out they come from Shem. That's it. One place. They come from one person. That's all you can tell. But it's extremely stable. So that's why it's very good for tracking lineage in that way. So when you hear someone say, we are Israel because we have E1B1A, just go, that's not true. I'm sorry. That doesn't mean you aren't from Israel or from the lineage of Israel. Okay? But to use that as the way of saying that proves, no, it proves nothing. All it does prove is absolutely you are from the lineage of Shem. Best bet. I'd rather be, as I said, I'd love to be from the lineage of Shem. He was the favorite son of Noah. He's the one that got the, same as Joseph was the favorite son of Jacob. They're our favorite sons. And Esau, look at the Esau Jacob thing with what happened there. Yes, there's favored sons, and there's usually a reason why they are the favored son. Not always right, but that's usually there. But remember that you're pointing to Shem. Shem is your father, not Israel. Shem. Now, if you happen to come from one of the little branches that Israel was out of all of Shem, then great. And that's nothing wrong. But the DNA cannot show that at all. Not even ever, not slightly, not at all. It cannot. It can show you come from one group, and I believe that group to be Shem, so I'll label that E1B1A Shem and E1B1B Ham. That's fine. But to go beyond that, it can't show you anything else. I've stated this. I want to say one more time, whether you're from Midian, Eber, Melchizedek, Edom, Moab, Israel, or Ishmael, or any of them, then you will still be in the same group. You're all in the same group. I don't care where you're from. When your Y chromosome is going to be in that group. As I said, whether you like them or not, that's the group that they're in, because it's only what it is. It's that huge macro. It's like looking at one star, and that star way up in the sky, that's all you can say. You are the star, let's say the star of Shem. That's all you can say. You cannot say you're from anything else because of the DNA on the Y or the male side. Only that one thing, okay? The mtDNA, or the maternal mosaic, as they call it. Okay, this, at least in Africa, consists of LO, L1, L2, L3, and M1 branches, different branches. And it comes only from the mother, not the father. Whereas the Y was from the father, the mtDNA comes from only the mother. It does not mix with other groups. It stays, just like the Y, it stays constant. It lasts tens of thousands of years. It shows ancient migration patterns. The Y chromosome doesn't so much. Whereas because there's different groups within the Y chromosome, different Ys mixed in, they can track those things through the maternal side. So it shows ancient migrations. It shows where women move to, and it shows who married into Israel, if you like. Because if you believe that Israel was this mixed multitude, they married these many wives, they kept the Shem line perfect, which is the lineage for the blessings and the covenant. The women like Rahab and Ruth and the wives of Noah, Zipporah, and as these people moved in and merged in, or the Jebusites, or Solomon married these other women, as they came in, they did not stop the Y chromosome from being what it was, but they made on the female side a mixed multitude, and it shows up among the women, which is why I said Sudan was so fascinating, because that's where you find all these different maternal lines all mixed with the E1B1A. The Y chromosome shows tribe, not which tribe. It only shows, as I said, the star of Shem. It only shows that tribe, nothing else. You're from the tribe of Shem, that's as far as it'll take you. And on the maternal side, it doesn't show you what tribe you're in either, but it will show you that you have come from different maternal lineages in that way. The next thing, and I did not know this about DNA, probably you guys do, but I did not. 1% of the study is on the Y chromosome, 1% more or less is on the female side, 98 or 99% is from what they call autosomal DNA, or the modern mix. So most of what you're getting on your DNA thing has nothing to do with anything 2,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago, and not even really 500 years ago. It has to do with fairly recent, because your father and mother make up half and half of the autosomal DNA. That's what they test when they're giving you that study back that says, you're half from, let's say you're an American person that is part from Africa or African American roots and part European roots. Well, the mother's lineage will show on there and the father's lineage 50-50. And then you look at the grandparents, and then it's 25-25. And then you look then it's 5 or 10, 15%, then it's down to 5, then it's down 1.5. So once you're back 5, 6 generations, you've only got 1.5% of one of those people coming through in that. So if you go back 1,000 years, or 20 or 30 generations, or 2,000 or 3,000 years, it doesn't show up anything. It's nothing. It's zero. It doesn't show anything. Nada. It's only showing you this autosomal DNA really in 200 or 300 years. That's basically all that it's showing. Because once it gets back further, it has no credibility because it's just a mixture of too much. So it comes from both parents. It mixes every generation, whereas the other two did not mix. They were stable. This mixes every generation, and that dilutes every generation. And it becomes meaningless after 1,000 to 2,000 years, which is why, like I said, if, one kind person said, yeah, you must have Israelite blood. And I'm going like, I'm a Gentile, right? But who knows, back 1,000 years ago, could be, but there's no zero way of proving it. Maybe if you get your genealogy back 1,000 years, which is hardly possible at all either, then you might be able to prove that. But through the DNA, not at all. It's meaningless. It will not show up at all. It only shows modern regional similarity. Very important to understand similarity. If your study shows you're Igbo, Yoruba, or Bantu, or shows you're from some part of Europe or German or whatever, it does not show that 2,000 years ago, that's who you were too. It just shows that the group that is living there now is very similar to your mix that you have in this proportion. And as you know, if you've had your DNA done, it changes out over time as well. But it's a very modern mix. So it doesn't really even show you. I asked it this, and it was fascinating. The only reason they say that you're Igbo or you're Bantu or you're Yoruba, because of course those terms are what? Those are colonial terms generally. Bantu is just not even 150 years old. There's just peoples that speak a common language, but it's not the same people. There's hundreds of different Bantu nations and groups. And so if it gives you a label, let's say it says you're Zulu or you're Fulani or whatever, the group that it puts you in, it's just saying people, they have decided that the Fulani, let's say, live in the Mali or Burkina Faso area, that area, or in Nigeria you have the Igbo, or you have the Zulu in South Africa. So when they see that the DNA pool of other people comes from that sort of area where they'll say, oh, you're Igbo. They don't prove that you're Igbo through the DNA. They just say, there's other people that are like you and they live in this area, and on our maps we call that Igbo, or we call that Bantu, or we call that Fulani. So it doesn't actually prove that you are of that group. It just says, yeah, that's why they call it a similarity. It's an association. It's a closeness, a related amount. But the further you get out, the less reliable it is. It's like, yes, you can use genetics to find your cousins maybe, but to find your cousins that are, let's say, 13 times removed, let's say your family's split in 1,400 or 1,300, well, the DNA is not going to show that your cousin 10 times removed, and it's not going to show you that. It's going to show you the nearer relatives, the very close people. But it's the same thing with this. But the only reason your study says that you're Igbo, Yoruba, is because the people that have similar to you are found in that similar area. Okay, so take that for what it is worth. Now, it doesn't mean you're not that group, but they are not confirming that. They're just saying, yeah, it's like for mine, you're from Ireland, but my last name being Stewart, it doesn't say you're Stewart and you came from here and you're da. No, it says, yeah, you are this from this area. But does that mean that every relation that I ever had that traces into Scotland, they're all from? No, they could have moved in from somewhere else 500 years ago, or who knows. They're just saying the people that live in that part of Scotland are like you in that area. And actually there's a lot of people in North America, in Massachusetts, that are like you too. And it's the same kind of thing. I think I don't know your African American studies as well as I should, but if yours says, hey, you have people like you in Brazil, and you're Bantu, well, that would make sense because a lot of Bantu people were moved to Brazil in the slave trade. So you'd find Bantu people living there. And it would be the same as if So then does that mean that you came from Brazil? No, it just means that people that are like you are found here as well. So anyway, I find that very interesting. I'll put this chart up just so you know. 10 generations out, or about 300 years, many ancestors leave 0 DNA. Because autosomal DNA, we're not talking the Y and the MT, but the autosomal that is used for all your studies of who you are. After 10 generations, there's really nothing. After 20 generations, 600 years, the autosomal DNA is scrambled, meaning it can't distinguish anything really. 40 generation, and it's just noise, so 1200 years, 2000 years, and it cannot identify anything or any ancient tribe or any ancient people. You can't even tell where in the world you're from after 60 generations that way. So DNA cannot show that you're Israel or Moab or Edom or Ishmael or Midian or Abraham or Melchizedek or Eber. It can only show that you are of Shem. It can show that you have matriarchal lineages that come from these areas where those women tended to live in Africa or wherever your family is. And it can show in the last few hundred years, your genetics you have are linked somehow to these people that are living in these areas. And that's all it can show. It cannot show back 1,000 years ago who you were, who your family was 1,000 years ago, and separate them out from another family 1,000 years ago. So much less go back 3,000 years ago. You can't separate out the people of, let's say, David. You can't separate out his group of the 12 tribes from any of the other 12 tribes. You can't separate out the 12 tribes from the people of Edom or Ammon or any of the other groups that come from Shem, the Ishmaelites. You can't separate any of them out. They're all going to be the same. I want to talk about Jesus, my favorite story with the Samaritan woman, for a minute, okay? Because what does he say? He says salvation is of the Jews. He could say the Y chromosome is of the Jews. It's also of all the 12 tribes of Israel. We talk way too much about Judah, no problem. But there's other tribes. There's 12 other tribes, actually. 11 if you're happy with that, but there's 12. There's 12 other tribes once you count the 2 from Joseph. They have just as much blessings as Judah does, except for the lineage of the Messiah through David. That's it. Everything else, the Abrahamic covenant and the covenants with Moses, it's the same seed, same line, no difference. But he does say that salvation is of the Jews, because salvation comes through the Davidic or Messianic covenant, not through just the Abrahamic covenant, although that's included as well. So this woman would be like Rahab or Ruth. She could be invited in, but she is not of that lineage. So seed is paternal, which I think most of my viewers understand. But the heart that he's talking about could be the maternal covenant, or from both, or she might not be even, whether she is of Israel originally or not, doesn't really matter. But that is the heart that Jeremiah talked about, the heart covenant, or coming through the mother's side. So seed was definitely paternal. And when we read what Jesus said, which we don't ever discuss, he said, I have many sheep which are not of this fold. Them also I must bring. Where did he go? I'm sure he went to see the lost tribes, because he said he had to go to all the house of Israel, which meant he went to all the house of Israel, wherever they happened to be. He went there. I believe that. But he did not go to the Gentiles, which is anybody that was not in the Abrahamic family themselves. So what does the DNA tell us? Not tribe, not Israel, not Moab, not Ishmael, not Canaan, not any of that. But it does tell us, yes, you might be from this group that might be Ham, or you might be from this group that might be the Nilo-Saharan group, or you might be from the Khoisan, or you might be from the Pygmy. It can tell you that, or from some of the European groups in those areas. But it cannot tell you anything more than that. The female side can tell you some migrations within Africa. That is true. Doesn't tell you the tribe anymore either, but it does tell you where those lineages probably moved, because they can trace the mtDNA. So if anyone tells you you're from Israel by your DNA, just say, no, you can't tell that. It's not possible. It is not possible. And you can check this out yourself. It cannot be done that way. Which I think is why, to me, what is going to be the real key as to who someone is they are of Israel or not. I love what Jesus said to the seed, the literal seed of Abraham, when he's talking, whether it's in Nazareth, but especially to the Pharisees. He said, if you were of my seed, basically, or my heart, you would do the works of Abraham. So for me, when I want to see the dry bones arise, as some viewers said, they're shaking now, but as I see the dry bones arising, what are they going to arise into? Not being like the Pharisees. They're going to rise to be like Abraham, the heart of Abraham, the kindness, the generosity, the pleading for the poor and the people in Sodom and all that. That is their father. And what did Jesus said? Your father, he said to them, is the devil. Didn't mean that their father was literally the devil. He meant that your heart is on that. And Abraham's heart was on this. So though you might be my seed, and John the Baptist said the same thing, that God can make stones into the seeds of Abraham, many seeds of Abraham, but the remnant, the few, will follow Abraham and have him to be their father, or Jesus if you prefer, or Shem or whoever. They'll follow that lineage and that way of life. And even though the seed, literally seed, may be of this group, but if they follow that father, that's their father. It doesn't change their DNA, though, just so you know. Because I had people, like I said, that came on and said, no, definitely Esau was A1, E1B because he couldn't be. I'm going, no, of course he's A1, E1A, right? He's born of the same father, which means he has the father's lineage. So if we can use what's truthful for truth. Now, was Edom righteous? It doesn't say he was. So does that mean he got the covenant? No, he did not. But does that mean he had a different father because we don't like that? We just push him out of the family? No, he's still part of the family. So be grateful if your test came out that you are of Shem. Mine did not say that. Okay, so I am not by my father of Shem. It doesn't point that way. But if you are Moab, be grateful. And if you are of some other lineage, be grateful. Be grateful for our fathers, right? Be grateful for our fathers. I'm doing another video, I haven't gotten it out yet, about the Bantu, the Yoruba, the Igbo, and all these groups. There's 1 billion plus people in Africa. And now people are pushing and using, as I said, using DNA to say, you're all Israel. And I'm going like, there's 1,000 years, 1,300 years between Shem and Moses coming into Africa from Egypt into the lower part of coming down or up into Africa, if you want to call it that way. 1,300 years. The land was already full of Shemites, plus Hamites and Khoisan and Pygmy. The land was full by the time Moses came in, which is why they had to battle their way in. It was already a full land. Millions and millions and millions of people. Who knows how many, but millions were already living there. In another video I did, I mentioned the fact that America had 3 or 4 million people when it became from colonies into a country. And in 250 years, it's 300 and something million people living there. That's only 250 years. We're talking the Shemites and the Hamites and all these groups were in Africa for 1,300 years before Moses came out. So they were already huge peoples. These Y chromosomes were everywhere, everywhere. So you can't prove that Israel was just, it doesn't do you any good to do that, in my opinion. It's best to know that your father, for me, if I could trace my father back to Melchizedek over a Pharisee, well, I'd rather go to Melchizedek. Sorry. And if I could trace it back to Solomon, no, sorry. I'd rather go back to Melchizedek. I'd rather go to Eber. Because I don't want to go to unrighteous fathers. I want to go to a righteous. I want to be, in the end, I'd like to be with righteous people. And even if I'm the Gentile coming in to be a stranger in the midst, and if I'm worthy of that at some day, I want to be with the righteous fathers. I don't want to be with the ones that weren't, that follow this other guy. I want to be with the Baal and the Asherah and all that. I don't want to go that way. I want to be with this group. And the dry bones are going to be this group, even if they're a remnant. Does that mean every seed of Abraham is going to go that way? Absolutely not. I don't believe so. Great majority will probably go that way, but many will go this way. And the more, if I can help, or anyone can help to help them go that way, then that's the work of the Father in our day right now, I believe. That's the great work that's happening, preparing the way. So use your DNA for what it can be used for, and don't use it for what it can't be used for. And also don't get sucked in my opinion, with falsehoods that are used to promote things that are not true. Even though they might sound nice, it's not nice to be in falsehoods, whether it comes from the colonial powers, my people, if you want to call it that, the terrible things that were done by the colonial powers, or it comes from within your own group. And I see there's a lot of the people that are following this guy that are within your own group a lot. And I see it online a lot. And they're teaching you falsehoods and taking the sheep that way, even though they appear to be of the seed, but they're like that group, like the Pharisees, they're going that way. And that's a danger. And I can't help with that. But I can say, be grateful that you're from Shem and Melchizedek and Eber and Arphaxad and all these people. Be grateful that your lineage is a great lineage. And that's what your DNA can show, that you are from Shem. And if you feel to join the channel, please do down below. I'm going to be starting to do some lives hopefully soon. And if you enjoyed this video, here's one that I just did on Canaan and the giants. And here's another one that I think you might enjoy. Thanks for watching today. And please give it a like and share if you can, if you feel it's of use to anyone. Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.